The blood-red sun hung low over Rattlesnake Gulch when 5 horsemen topped the ridge and stopped like they owned the sky. Dust rolled around their horses' legs and fell quiet. Down below, a lone ranch sat in the open, small and steady, with warm lamplight spilling from the cabin windows. It looked peaceful. It looked easy. That's why the men smiled. "That's it," the leader said, his voice rough as dry ground. "Widow Knox's place." They did not know the widow they were watching had once been feared across the territories. Years ago, folks had whispered about a woman whose hands moved faster than thought, a woman who ended fights before they even started, a woman they called Quickdraw Bell. The man in front raised a brass spyglass and studied the ranch like a butcher judging meat. His name was Rook Mercer. A scar split his brow, and his pale gray eyes held a cold kind of patience. "You sure this is the one?" the youngest rider asked, shifting in his saddle. "Looks like nothing but a widow and her girl." Rook did not lower the spyglass. "That ground sits on the only spring for 10 miles, he said. "When the drought comes, whoever controls that water controls the whole valley." He snapped the spyglass shut. "Hollis Granger wants it." At the name, the other men went still. Granger was a land baron from Shadow Creek. When he wanted a piece of earth, he took it. Some folks sold. Some folks disappeared. "Remember," Rook said, "we offer to buy. She refuses. Then we apply pressure." His mouth curved into a thin smile. "If pressure means using the girl, that's just business. Have you ever stood between a mother and her child? Have you ever made the mistake of thinking quiet meant weak?" Inside the cabin, Belle Knox pressed dough under her palms, steady and calm. Silver ran through her dark hair, braided tight down her back. Her sleeves were rolled up, and her arms showed the strength of years of work, not show. Through the open window, she watched her daughter Rowan gather eggs from the hen house. "Ma," Rowan called, holding up a big brown egg. "Old Bessie outdid herself today." Belle smiled, and for a moment she looked like any other ranch widow in Arizona territory. "That hen's always full of surprises," she called back. For 6 years, that's what Belle had been here. A widow who raised fine horses. A woman who taught Sunday lessons. A neighbor who kept to herself, but helped when help was needed. No one in Rattlesnake Gulch knew what she used to be. No one knew her hands once rested on twin pistols instead of bread dough. Belle wiped flour from her fingers and crossed to an old chest in the corner. She opened it only when Rowan was outside. Inside lay yellowed clippings and worn paper, folded and refolded until the creases looked tired. Headline spoke of a woman who stopped stagecoach robberies, a woman who outshot every challenger. One line still made her stomach tighten even after all these years. 10 men, 10 seconds, 10 bullets. Beneath the papers rested a matched pair of cold peacemakers, ivory grips inlaid with turquoise. They were beautiful in a way that felt dangerous. Belle stared at them like they were a door she had locked long ago. She closed the chest and turned back to the window. That's when she heard the hooves. Fast, many, not the slow, friendly sound of neighbors. Belle froze. Her body knew before her mind did. Without thinking, her hand moved toward her hip, reaching for a gun that wasn't there. The motion was old. It was truth written into muscle. Outside, 5 riders came into view, riding straight at the cabin with a purpose that made Belle's mouth go dry. "Rowan," she called, and her voice carried a sharp edge Rowan had learned to obey. "Come inside now." Rowan looked up, saw her mother's face, and didn't ask questions. She left the egg basket in the dirt and ran to the porch. Belle kept her eyes on the riders as Rowan slipped inside. "Root cellar," Belle said low and firm. "Out the back. Stay there until I tell you." Rowan's breath caught. "Ma, what's happening?" "Do it," Belle said. The single word ended the fear and the debate. Rowan disappeared, and Belle moved to the hearth, lifting Ian Knox's old Winchester from its hooks. Ian had built this cabin with his own hands. He had died in a holdup years ago, caught by a stray bullet while Belle was doing the work that made her famous. After that day, she had buried Quickdraw Bell for her child's sake. She had tried to become only a mother. Now the past rode up her driveway. The riders pulled up in front of the porch. Rook Mercer tipped his hat with a smooth kind of disrespect. "Mrs. Knox," he said. "Name's Rook Mercer. We're here on behalf of Hollis Granger." Belle stepped onto the porch with the Winchester loose at her side. She held herself like a ranchwoman, but her eyes were flat and watchful. "What can I do for Mr. Granger?" she asked. "He wants your land," Rook said. "He's offering double its value." "I'm afraid it's not for sale," Belle replied, calm as still water. "Not now, not ever." Rook's smile faded and returned colder. "That's unfortunate. This piece is important. Good water, strong position." Belle did not blink. "I said no." She turned toward the door, but Rook's voice followed her, sharper now. "That's a fine-looking daughter you've got. World's a dangerous place for a young girl." Belle's hand stopped on the doorframe. For 6 years, she had avoided trouble. She had chosen quiet, but there were words that pulled a trigger inside a mother. She turned slowly and met his eyes. Something in her gaze shifted, just enough. "My answer stands," Belle said, polite but hard. "Move along." Rook studied her like he was trying to fit a name to a face. "We'll be back," he said. Then he added, almost casual, "Folks around here might be curious to learn who their neighbor really is." The riders turned away and rode off, leaving dust and a warning behind. Belle waited until the ridge was empty. Then she walked inside and bolted the door. Her hands did not shake, but her chest felt tight. She crossed to the bedroom and unlocked the trunk Rowan had never been allowed to open. Beneath blankets and clothes, Belle pressed a hidden catch. The false bottom released. Inside lay a tooled gun belt with twin holsters, soft gloves worn smooth by years of practice, and her old journal, filled with notes and marks. Belle stared at it like it was both a sin and a lifeline. She heard a small sound behind her. Rowan stood in the doorway, eyes wide, staring at the belt and the clippings like they belonged to a stranger. "Ma," she whispered. "What is this?" Belle looked at her daughter, and the lie she had lived for 6 years broke clean in her throat. "There are things about me you don't know," Belle said. "Things I hope you'd never need." Outside, far off, hoof started again, louder than before, and Belle knew the next visit would not come with an offer. It would come with force. Belle did not sleep that night. She sat at the kitchen table with the lamp turned low, listening to every creak of the cabin and every shift of wind outside. The warning in Rook Mercer's voice stayed in her ears like a splinter. He was not the kind of man who threatened for fun. He threatened because he meant it. Belle kept her face calm for Rowan's sake, but inside she was counting steps, doors, angles, and the distance from the porch to the corral. Before dawn, she went to the root cellar and tapped the door in their secret pattern. Rowan opened it with wide, tired eyes. Belle pulled her into a tight hug that lasted one heartbeat too long. Then she stepped back and held Rowan's shoulders. Belle told her the truth in the simplest way. Men were coming again. Men who wanted the spring. Men who would use anything they could to win. Rowan tried to be brave, but her voice shook when she asked if Belle thought they would take her. Belle did not lie. She said it was possible, and that's why they would not give those men the chance. When the sun rose, Belle hitched the wagon and drove into Rattlesnake Gulch like it was any other Saturday. She made her usual stops, kept her voice steady, and smiled at the right times. But her eyes did not rest. She watched who watched her. She noted strangers near the saloon, the way 2 men paused when she passed, and the way one of them turned his head too slowly, like he wanted to memorize her face. At Moore's General Store, Elizabeth Moore greeted her with a warm smile, but her gaze searched Belle's face. "You look like you saw a rattler in your bed," Elizabeth said softly as she weighed flour. "What happened out at your place?" "Nothing I can't handle," Belle answered, keeping her voice light. She did not want to pull the town into a storm. She had built this quiet life with careful hands. She did not want panic to tear it apart in a day. The bell over the door rang, and Sheriff Cyrus Holt stepped inside. He was in his 50s, steady and slow to speak, but his eyes missed nothing. He nodded to Elizabeth, then looked straight at Belle. "Mrs. Knox," he said, "I heard you had visitors." "Word travels fast," Belle replied. "It does when the visitors are like that," Holt said. His tone stayed calm, but his jaw tightened. "Rook Mercer and his crew asked questions at the saloon last night. Not just about your land. About you." Belle's hand stayed busy with her supplies. "People like stories," she said, "especially about a woman living alone." Holt did not smile. "They didn't come for stories. They came for leverage. Hollis Granger wants that spring. and Mercer is the kind of man who takes what he's told to take. Elizabeth leaned closer, lowering her voice. Some folks said Granger's men have been riding the outer roads all week, watching ranches, counting fences. Holt stepped nearer to Bell as if the walls might be listening. I can't arrest a man for looking, he said, but I can warn you. If Mercer comes again, don't play brave. Bring your girl into town. Stay at Moore's. Let me handle it. Bell met his eyes. Sheriff, I respect you, she said, but if those men want trouble, they won't wait for you to be standing between us. Holt studied her like he was weighing a puzzle. You shoot? He asked, blunt and quiet. Every rancher shoots, Bell said. Coyotes don't respect polite words. Holt nodded, but he did not look convinced. Take this warning seriously, he said. Mercer doesn't accept refusal. If you see riders, don't wait to find out what kind. Bell loaded her supplies, thanked Elizabeth, and left town with a steady face. But the moment the wagon wheels hit open ground, her calm started to crack. Holt's words hit a deeper fear. Mercer was digging. Mercer was pushing. And Mercer had already spoken Rowan's name without saying it. When Bell reached the ranch, Rowan met her at the gate. Her daughter tried to smile, but her eyes were sharp, watching the horizon. Bell saw how fast Rowan had grown in a single day. Bell pulled her inside and shut the door. She spoke low and clear, the way Ian used to speak when danger was near. If riders come, you go to Copper Canyon, Bell said. You know the trail. You know the old mining shack. You take the Winchester and you wait. You do not come back for me. Rowan's face went pale. Ma, no. Bell held her daughter's hands. Listen to me. They want the spring. They want to scare me into selling. They will try to use you to do it. I would rather face every man Granger can hire than let them put hands on you. Rowan swallowed hard. Then we should leave tonight, she said. Bell shook her head. Running is what they expect, she replied. Running makes you weak in their eyes. We prepare. We make it costly. That evening, the wind changed. The animals went quiet in a way Bell did not like. Then, just after dark, hoofs came again. This time louder, heavier. More than 5. Rowan froze. Bell moved fast, guiding her daughter toward the back door. Now, Bell whispered. Rowan grabbed the Winchester and the small bag Bell had already packed. She slipped out into the dark like a shadow and vanished toward the wash that led to Copper Canyon. Bell stood in the kitchen, listening until she could no longer hear Rowan's steps. Then she crossed to the chest, opened the false bottom, and lifted the gun belt like it weighed the whole past. She did not put it on yet. She went to the window instead. Lanterns bobbed in her yard. Men filled the space like wolves testing a fence. Rook Mercer sat his horse at the front, calm as a man walking into a store. 2 riders carried coils of rope. Another had a torch. Bell's stomach tightened, and a cold anger rose in her chest. Rook called out, his voice easy. Mrs. Knox, we're here to talk again. Bell stepped onto the porch with the Winchester in her hands. She kept it low, not aimed but ready. You heard my answer, she said. Rook smiled like he had expected her right where she stood. We did, he replied. That's why we brought better persuasion. One of his men rode forward and tossed something into the dirt. A child's egg basket landed at Bell's feet. The handle snapped, a few cracked shells still inside. Bell's breath caught. It was Rowan's basket from the hen house. It wasn't a weapon, but it hit her harder than one. Rook's eyes watched her face closely. Where's the girl? He asked. Bell's voice stayed calm, but it took effort. Inside, she lied. Rook tilted his head. Then call her out, he said. We just want a little conversation. You sign the papers, we ride away. And everyone keeps breathing. Bell could hear men spreading out around the cabin. Boots in the dirt. A soft thud against the side wall. They were searching, testing, circling. Bell raised the Winchester, still not firing. You take one step onto my porch, she said, and you will not step off it. Rook's smile didn't move, but his eyes cooled. You're brave, he said. Or you're desperate. A shout came from the side of the cabin. Cellar doors been opened. A man called. Bell's blood ran cold. The root cellar. If they found it empty, they would know Rowan had run. And if they knew she had run, they would track her. Rook's head turned slightly, and his expression shifted into satisfaction. He looked back at Bell. So the girl's gone, he said softly. That means you're going to do something reckless. Belle's grip tightened. Her mind raced through every trail, every ridge, every place Rowan might be seen. Copper Canyon was hidden, but not invisible to a man who knew how to hunt. Rook leaned forward in the saddle. "We'll find her," he said. "And when we do, you'll wish you sold your spring for half price." Belle did not answer. She stepped back into the cabin and shut the door, bolting it fast. She moved to the chest, pulled the belt free, and strapped it around her waist with hands that did not shake anymore. The leather settled on her hips like it had never left. Then she knelt by the hearth, slid out the loose stone, and lifted the oilcloth bundle. The twin Colts gleamed in the lamplight, ivory and turquoise, quiet and deadly. Outside, Mercer's men began to pound on the door. Belle stood, holstered both pistols, and took one slow breath. The widow who baked bread was still there, but she was not alone anymore. Something older had stepped forward, something that had been sleeping and waiting. Belle opened the back door and disappeared into the night, not running away, but moving to hunt. And far out in the dark toward Copper Canyon, a single owl called once, sharp and lonely, as if warning the world that men were about to learn what they had walked into. What would you do if the past you buried came knocking? What would you risk to protect the only thing that mattered? Belle moved through the dark like she belonged to it. She stayed low in the wash behind the cabin, keeping the barn between herself and the lanterns in the yard. Mercer's men were loud with confidence. They talked like they had already won. That made them careless. Belle listened to their boots, counted their voices, and watched the way they spread out around her home. Then she heard a sound that turned her blood cold. A short whistle. 3 quick blasts, answered by a faint call from the hills. It wasn't a bird. It was a signal. Belle's eyes cut toward the ridge line that led to Copper Canyon. She knew those rocks. She knew those trails. She had planned them like escape routes in her mind. And now she understood the truth. Mercer didn't only come to scare her. He came prepared. He had men out there already, waiting for the girl to run. Belle's jaw tightened so hard it ached. She could fight a dozen men in her yard. She could not fight time. She slipped away from the ranch and rode hard into the night, keeping her buckskin quiet, wrapping cloth around the hooves where the ground turned rocky. The moonlight painted the desert in pale silver, and the wind carried the faint smell of smoke from her own chimney, like a reminder of everything she would lose if she failed. Copper Canyon appeared ahead like a broken mouth in the earth. Belle left her horse behind a stand of scrub and moved on foot, climbing the switchback trail with careful steps. Her eyes searched for any sign. A scuffed rock, a snapped branch, a print in soft dirt. She found them fast. There were many tracks. Too many. They had been there. They were there. Belle reached the mining shack and stopped before the door. The latch was loose. The wood bore fresh marks, deep and ugly, like something had slammed into it. "Rowan," Belle whispered, and the word felt small against the canyon walls. No answer. Belle pushed the door open and stepped inside, both pistols drawn. Her breath held tight. The shack was dim and cold. The blankets she had stored were ripped from the corner. The cartridges on the table were scattered, and on the floor near the door lay something that made Belle's knees go weak. Rowan's scarf. It was twisted, and the edge was torn, like someone had grabbed it and pulled hard. Belle stood very still. For one moment, she was not Quickdraw Bell. She was only a mother staring at proof that her child had been taken. Then her face hardened, and the softness vanished. She found the message next, pinned to the table with a knife. It was written in rough pencil on torn paper. "Bring the papers. Bring the deed. Come alone, or the girl bleeds." Belle did not need to read it twice. Mercer had not just threatened her now. He had stolen the only thing she had built her whole quiet life to protect. Belle tucked the note into her pocket and knelt to study the tracks outside the shack. For men had taken Rowan. They headed south, back toward the ranch, cutting across the ridge line that offered speed and clear sight. They wanted Belle to come to them. They wanted her desperate and blind. They were about to learn how wrong that was. Belle rode back before dawn, not to surrender, but to set a trap. She entered her ranch from the east, keeping below the rise until the yard came into view. Her barn still stood, but fresh boot prints scarred the dirt. A small fire smoldered near the corral. Not enough to burn it down, just enough to send a message. Mercer was waiting. Lantern light filled the yard now, stronger than before. Horses were tied along the fence. Men moved with purpose, confident again, as if they had already broken her. Bell stepped into the open. Every head turned. Rook Mercer walked forward slowly, his coat open, one hand resting near his holster like he was posing for a picture. "Mrs. Knox," he said, too calm. "You came." Bell did not answer. Her eyes went past him, straight to the porch. Rowan stood there. Her hands were tied behind her back. Her hair was loose, and dust streaked her cheeks. A man held her by the arm. Another pressed a knife near her ribs, just close enough for Bell to see it. Rowan's eyes met Bell's, wide with fear, but she did not cry out. She held herself as steady as she could, like she was trying to be brave for her mother. That sight hit Bell like a punch. Mercer watched Bell's face closely, hungry for a crack. "You're going to sign," he said. "You're going to hand over the deed to the spring. You're going to leave this valley, and you're going to do it without making a fuss." Bell's voice came out low and flat. "Let her go." Mercer smiled. "After the ink dries." Bell's hands hovered near her pistols, but she did not touch them. "You don't understand what you've done," she said. Mercer's smile widened like he enjoyed the warning. "I understand plenty," he said. "I understand a widow is easy to frighten. I understand a mother will trade land for a living child." He nodded toward Rowan. "And I understand you're outnumbered." Bell looked at the men in the yard. 8 of them, maybe more. She counted positions. 1 by the barn, 2 near the fence, 1 on the porch, 2 by the door. Mercer in front. Her mind moved faster than her heart could keep up. She forced her voice to stay calm. "Bring the papers." Mercer snapped his fingers, and a man stepped forward with a folded document and a pen. Bell took 1 step closer, then another. She kept her posture loose, like she had accepted defeat. Rowan's chest rose and fell quickly. Her eyes begged Bell not to do it, but Rowan didn't know what Bell knew. Rowan didn't know her mother's hands had ended worse threats than this back when the world was rougher and Bell was younger. Bell reached for the paper. Mercer leaned in, pleased. "Good girl," he said. That was the moment Bell saw it. The man holding Rowan had shifted his grip. His knife hand wasn't steady. He was scared, and scared men made mistakes. Bell's fingers brushed the paper, then slid past it and lifted the lantern sitting on the rail beside Mercer. Mercer frowned. "What are you doing?" Bell's eyes did not leave his. "Showing you who you're dealing with." She threw the lantern into the yard. Flame burst across the dirt where oil splashed, spreading fast, bright, wild. Horses jerked against their ties. Men cursed and stepped back. And in that heartbeat of chaos, Bell moved. Her hands cleared leather, so fast it looked like her sleeves had flicked in the wind. 2 sharp cracks split the air. The knife flew from the man's hand on the porch, spinning away into the dirt. A 3rd crack hit the rope near Rowan's wrists, slicing it clean, without touching her skin. Rowan stumbled forward, free. The yard fell silent for half a second, like the whole world had stopped breathing. Then Mercer shouted, "Kill her." Men raised rifles. Bell's pistol spoke again, quick and cruel in their precision. A gun was knocked from a hand. A shoulder took a shot. A boot pinned to the ground. She did not waste bullets on anger. She used them to control space, to steal confidence, to break the shape of their attack. Rowan ran. Bell shouted, "To the cellar now." Rowan obeyed, sprinting behind the cabin as shots cracked in the yard. Bell stepped into the smoke and firelight like she owned it. Her face did not change. Her eyes were cold and focused, and every movement was clean. Mercer tried to draw. Bell was already aimed. Her shot hit his gun hand. Not hard, because she wanted him alive long enough to answer for what he had tried to do. Mercer screamed and fell back, clutching his wrist as blood ran between his fingers. The rest of his men hesitated, and hesitation was death in a fight like this. A new voice cut through the chaos, loud and firm. "Drop your weapons." Sheriff Cyrus Holt rode into the yard with 6 men behind him, rifles leveled. 2 deputies flanked him, and more riders appeared at the edge of the property, like shadows turning into steel. Mercer's crew looked around and realized they were trapped. 1 by 1, guns hit the dirt. Holt dismounted and stepped toward Bell, eyes wide as he took in the scene. Smoke. Fire. Men bleeding. Belle, standing with twin colts, held steady, her breathing calm. "Mrs. Knox," Holt said, voice tight. "Are you hurt?" "No," Belle answered. "Your daughter?" "She's alive," Belle said. "That's what matters." Holt nodded and turned toward Mercer, who was still on his knees, pale and shaking. "Rook Mercer," Holt said, "you're under arrest." Mercer spat into the dirt, hatred burning through pain. "You don't know who she is," he hissed. "You don't know what she used to be." Holt looked back at Belle, and in his eyes, Belle saw the question he had been carrying for days finally collide with the truth he had just witnessed. Belle did not flinch. She holstered her pistol slowly, like she was putting away a part of herself she had tried to bury. Then she walked to the back of the cabin and knocked a signal on the cellar door. 3 knocks. 4. 2. Rowan came out shaking, eyes red, face streaked with dirt. She ran into Belle's arms and held on like she might never let go. Belle wrapped her arms around her daughter and pressed her cheek to Rowan's hair. Her voice softened for the first time all night. "I'm here," she whispered. "You're safe." Rowan's hands gripped Belle's coat. "They said you'd fold," Rowan whispered. "They said you'd run." Belle looked over Rowan's shoulder at the men in irons, at Mercer glaring from the dirt, at Holt watching with a face full of hard respect. "I ran once," Belle said quietly. "I'm done running." The sun rose over Rattlesnake Gulch that morning, and by the time the light hit Main Street, everyone had heard. Some whispered with fear. Some whispered with awe. The widow on the East Ranch wasn't only a widow. She was a legend who had been living next door the whole time. Belle Knox did not correct them. She stood on her porch with Rowan beside her, watching Holt's deputies ride Mercer and his men toward jail. Belle's life would never be quiet again, not in the same way. But Rowan was alive, and the spring still flowed, and Belle finally understood something she had tried to deny for years. Peace was not the same as hiding, and if the past was going to keep finding her, then she would meet it standing up, with her daughter close, and her fear turned into something stronger. Do you believe that some things are worth fighting for? That a mother's love can be more dangerous than any gun? This story reminds us that quiet doesn't mean powerless, and that sometimes the most feared legends are the ones living quietly next door. If this story moved you, subscribe to hear more tales from the Wild West, stories of mothers who became warriors, justice delivered by steady hands, and courage that refused to back down. And if you've ever had to fight for what mattered most, share your story in the comments below. Because every act of protection, every moment of standing up when the world says lie down, deserves to be remembered.